Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. I hope you have a wonderful day. It's good to be live again. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat room if this is first time that you're attending. And of course, you can also introduce yourself if you've been here before, because the chat room keeps changing. I'm streaming this to LinkedIn. Although I won't be able to see the comments that are posted on LinkedIn itself, I will watch them afterwards. And I'm also posting on or streaming on my YouTube channels, which is youtube.com/@Father Roderick -books. So Father Roderick Books and Father Roderick, the main channel. So that's youtube.com/Father Roderick. It's great to have some time to chat. If you have any questions, this is a Ask Me Anything session. And every week, I'm always excited by the wide variety of questions that I get, and also to just hear from you and how you're doing. Now, this is, of course, the week after the, let's say, the week of mourning after Pope Francis died on the right after Easter. I did a live stream that same day. Of course, a lot has happened. The funeral was this past Saturday. I watched it live thanks to the excellent coverage that was provided by the Vatican News Services. I thought just the way they filmed the whole thing was insanely good. I mean, I was already impressed by what they did in previous years. But this time they even had like a drone flying over the buildings of the Vatican. I assume it was a drone. It didn't look like a helicopter shoot. And of course that would cause too much noise. But just, it looked like a movie. It was really weird. I think it helped to really get into the experience. And I've been on St. Peter's Square on historic events like these many times before. But when you're on the square itself, you don't get these kind of images. This is really a superior experience to a certain extent. Plus, it's very easy to understand everything. Dutch TV provided subtitling for the homily, for instance, and they had commentary for the parts that they didn't have subtitles for. It was just done in such a perfect way. And that fills me with hope also for the upcoming conclave. The news broke that the cardinals have decided that the conclave will start on May 7th. So right now they still have about 7-8 days to convene kind of informally, even though the secret around the conclave has already started. So they're not allowed to speak to anyone about, what's being discussed. And of course, that will get even more strict once they enter the Sistine Chapel. But this week is probably the most important week, more important than when the conclave starts, because the conclave itself is more of you could say, a retreat. It's a spiritual event. There's a lot of praying. Of course, there's also some voting and some people speak. But I think the decisions are made right now in this phase. So that is why we all need to pray for the cardinals, that they may be wise in picking the next pope. And it also, usually leads to a pretty speedy procedure. So once the conclave will start, I kind of expect this to be over in the span of, 2 days or maybe 3. But I think there will be a very quick consensus, which means that before the end of not this weekend, but the week after, we will have a new pope. And who is it? Nobody knows. Do we know him? Well, we've seen him because he's already walking around there unknown and probably not knowing himself that he's going to be pope. But it's always kind of funny to see how that works. Like he's already there. So it's like the Schrodinger's pope. He's there and he's not there. But it's going to be an exciting week. And of course, we're all really looking forward to seeing who they will pick, because it's obviously going to be very important to kind of for the course of the church. Are we going to continue on the same path as Pope Francis? Is there going to be kind of a course correction? What's the style? What's the vibe of this new pope? Obviously, you don't find a clone of Pope Francis. He was so unique in his style. So no matter who succeeds him, we'll have some big shoes to fill, and we'll have to kind of establish his own style. Just as Pope Benedict also had to find his own, way of doing things, his own way of speaking. He was very, very different from John Paul II, who was almost a rock star to a certain degree. Whereas Pope Benedict was more of a, he was a teacher. He was more calm, more quiet, soft-spoken, very, very learned, very intellectual also. And then after Pope Benedict, of course, Pope Francis was like an even bigger change of style. And yeah, so whoever it's going to be, it must be a daunting task. Let's go to the questions. Let me move this window here to the side, and then I can see what you are commenting. Yeah, Schrodinger's Pope, why not? Mike is there as well. Hello. Beef Stewie is there. Happy Easter to you too. In your ministry with people at conventions, fairs, and other community outings, what's the biggest misconception people have about the Catholic faith? Let me project the question here. I think, people usually don't really have that much to say about the church, or at least if they have criticisms, they don't share it with me, because we're all there basically to share our common love for fairy stories and fantasy. So I never had any huge debates or anything. I would say what I sometimes encounter is just this very simplistic idea of what the church is, and that anyone could be, become a bishop, or the people think about the church sometimes in a way as they think about big companies. It's like your biggest goal is to be the CEO, and so they see like a priest obviously wants to become a bishop, and if he's cool and if he's kind, then yes, of course, Father Roderick, you should be bishop, you should be pope. It's like, well, that's not the way the church works, and it's certainly not how we as ministers of that church look at the functioning and the hierarchy of the church. Every state, you could say, whether you are a priest or a religious person, a bishop, or the pope, these are all different forms of service, which all require different abilities. So it does not at all depend on someone's, fluency, or how easy they talk, how nice they are. There is a lot more that is required to be, for instance, a good bishop. You have to have certain managerial skills. You need to have a very good, solid theological foundation, formation. Depending on where you are appointed, it helps if you speak the language, if you know the culture. And for the Pope, obviously, it's even more different, in the sense that a Pope, there's not one single, you could say, outline of what kind of person should be Pope, because it changes all the time, because the needs of the church change, the situation of the world changes. And so at one point in history, you'll need this kind of guy, and then later on, you might need this kind of guy. And sometimes popes can be very disruptive in a certain way, just like Pope Francis was. And if you look back in history, we've always had popes like that were very, like, shaking up the bed and causing a lot of unrest, and things start to move and change. And then over time, that settles down. Sometimes you have popes that are really thinkers. They have to kind of like put things in order again and try to create unity. And in the church, it's never, the pope is not the like the big boss, and if he says it's so, then it is so. Papal infallibility, as they call it, is invoked very, very rarely, and it's always the final step in a process of discernment that is worldwide. So the Pope is not an absolute monarch. He's not a king. He's not an emperor. But the Pope needs to have the capacity to take in all these different voices and different opinions. And I think nowadays, especially if you consider how important the church is in many parts of the world, having some diplomatic skills, having some knowledge about what's going on in the world is also extremely important. So this is why you probably will see more seasoned candidates, older candidates being chosen, not because they want an old guy, but just because they have had more time to get to know the world and to think about the world. So there was this TV series about the young Pope. That is just very, very unlikely that would ever happen in reality, because yes, someone who is young might have fresh ideas, etc., but that person will not have had the time to gain the wisdom that you need and the experience that you need, let alone, build a network of relationships that you need in order to fulfill that particular ministry in a good way. And so that's kind of something I sometimes hear. Most of the time, what I encounter is surprise. So one misconception is that priests or even religious people in general should not be involved with fantasy stories. And I think this is due to the fact that in certain Christian denominations, certain groups, especially, an example is the evangelical side of the Christians, there is usually a lot of resistance against fantasy, anything that is perceived as a cultural threat, something that is not compatible with the Bible. And oftentimes, because I live in a predominantly Protestant country, not in terms of numbers, but definitely in terms of culture, I see that a lot of kind of the aversion that a lot of non-Christians have towards the Christian church is based on their aversion to a certain group of Christians and to their stance against culture. And so I usually tell them I was a geek long before I became a priest, and I hope to be a geek for the rest of my life as well. Catholic Church is very open to poetry, to the arts, to science, and the great storytellers of our culture have often been Catholic or Christian. I mean, look at a guy like Tolkien, a very, very faithful Catholic who wrote also from a distinctly Catholic perspective and deliberately did so. And so how can I be against fantasy if there is such a great man like Tolkien who wrote one of the most important sagas, fantasy sagas of our time, at least in the Western world? And so, and oftentimes when they hear that, it's like, yeah, you're right. Actually, we didn't expect that. And so there's usually just surprise that I'm there, and even more surprise that I'm interested in their stories. And I walk around interviewing people all the time. And even when I'm interviewing people, they often don't even realize that I'm a real priest. They just assume I'm a cosplayer. And so they go along, they're very relaxed during the interview, and then later on I post their story and the photo that I took of them. And then they're like, dude, wait, so you were a real priest? And they're very, really surprised. For me, it also works vice versa. I also had a lot of preconceptions about the people that visited those festivals and fairs, and the more I get to know these people, the more I see they're just like me. I am part of that world. I don't have cosplay costumes, but that's just because I am very busy and always get distracted. And I've been wanting to create a stormtrooper costume for more than a decade now, and I never ever push through because I have a scatterbrain and I never really focus on one thing at the same time. But yeah, just getting to know what my biggest takeaway from these events is. What you see, the people you encounter there are among the finest people you can have, because they're creative. They're there to be there with friends, so they're in a good mood. They're positive. They are extremely forthcoming and helpful. You see a lot of people in wheelchairs and people with other impairments that walk around there, and they are surrounded with love and friendship, and people help them, and they get in first row for every public event. And that's just, I think, showing us what the world can be. And it's sad that we have to dress up and kind of imagine that we are in a fairy tale world to show this side. And I think a lot of the world, and also of my fellow priests and colleagues, I think a lot of Catholics have no idea how much they have in common with what's happening at these festivals. But as I've always done in my life as a priest, you need to sometimes just be in the forefront of these things and just go out there and meet people and be yourself. And then what I do is I tell the stories. I pass them on. I show my audience, the wider audiences that I have, what kind of people are there. And hopefully that will inspire others and maybe even incentivize them to also participate in events like that. Hope that answers your question. Thanks for asking. We got Starlord, who is there. Good morning to you. And it's warm and sunny in Washington, D.C. It's also pretty warm here in the Netherlands. It's going to be even warmer in the next 2 days. I think tomorrow it's going to be 25 Celsius. And then on Thursday, they even predict 27, which are summer temperatures. And that's insane. It's like the beginning of May. Hopefully we're not going to have one of those excruciatingly hot summers, because I don't do well in hot weather. Actually, this is my temperature. With these kind of temperatures, with this kind of weather, I am at my best. I'm super productive. I've been up at 6 o'clock in the morning for 2 days now. I'm sitting here for 4 hours writing my novel because temperatures are nice. And then I go for a walk after lunch. I'm in the woods. I get more inspired. I return here. I do some more work, and then I do the live stream. And once this live stream is over, I'll go out for a final walk. I try to do 3 walks per day now. It's because I want to get back in shape. I have this big walking event in the month of July that's upcoming, and that's going to require me to do a lot of preparation. But I'm kind of slicing the distance that I want to walk every day in 3 parts. So it is a nice way to also break up the day. I noticed that it my mind reacts very well to it. So I try to do a walk after breakfast. Usually that's when I gather my thoughts. I come up with ideas. Then I go and do my novel writing. So I do creative writings in the morning, writing in the mornings. Then lunch, I go usually during that walk, I record some podcasts. So today I didn't do anything, but yesterday I recorded all the episodes of my podcast, Story Secrets, which, in case you don't know it, you should absolutely listen to, because I talk about Star Wars, I talk about movies that I've watched. It's all about stories. And I've done that podcast since 2005. So it's a daily podcast right now. So I do short episodes. It's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes per day. Nice to kind of squeeze in if you have a lost moment or so. You want to have my opinion on, for instance, Star Wars Andor or the latest anime series that I'm watching. It's much easier for me to produce than the videos. So I do that. I record that during the walk after lunch. And then if I still have to do some steps, because I try to walk about 12,000 steps right now in this phase of the training. After dinner, I go out for an evening walk, and usually I combine that with getting my groceries, because I live very close to all the shops here. So literally 2 streets away from my house, there you've got all the supermarkets, and so I tend to walk around there for quite a bit, and then usually that does the trick. So yeah, but of course, the hotter it gets, the least I want to be outside in the sun. So I don't have air conditioning. Although, if it gets hot this summer, I might actually install an air conditioning unit, at least in this office, because I like sitting here. It's very easy to warm it and also to cool it, so it won't be as energy consuming as if I would try to cool down the whole house. But we'll see. It's also very expensive to install that. So anyway, let's see. Binary Rainbow with we are to respect the views from the Pope. After all, he is infallible. While on the chair of St. Peter, I enjoyed the more progressive approach. Do you think we will continue that direction? I think it's very likely that they will choose a candidate who will continue the direction traced by Pope Francis. I don't know if we're getting someone with the same charism, but charism is, it's just one aspect. What I want is someone who creates continuity. If we get a pope who kind of reverts everything, and there are some cardinals who really would like to dial back everything that Pope Francis did. I mean, my own bishop is one of the kind of, you could say, opponents of some of the aspects of Pope Francis, his direction that Pope Francis took. His main criticism is that it creates a lot of confusion, and he's kind of more of an intellectual. He just wants to write some treatise, define very clearly stuff, whereas of course Pope Francis was like, well, I'm not going to define things. I leave it open. It's for theologians to think about that. And so he sometimes deliberately, I think, made things a bit vague so that it creates room to think and to, explore questions and issues from different directions. So not every bishop not every cardinal will like that. But in general, if you look at the overall feel that I had during the funeral and over the past years that I've been in Rome, I think a lot of people inside the Curia and bishops and priests and faithful are very happy with the direction that Pope Francis has taken us into. It's not by accident that this Pope was so popular. More than 200,000 people showed up for his funeral. I mean, that says something. You cannot ignore it. And of course, the church is not a democracy. It's not about the popular vote. And it could very well be that, it has happened in the past that we get a pope and everybody's like, why? Why this one? Why? The church is a church of centuries. And oftentimes you really have to step back like 50 years or 100 years and then look back, and then sometimes you see what the idea was or where things led. It's very tricky, I think, to judge too quickly. When Pope Benedict was chosen, I initially was very happy because I thought, he's been working so closely with John Paul II. He's a great theologian. I really love the books that he wrote. And of course he wasn't as, charismatic, but I was like, oh, who cares? He's kind. I met him once. He's very soft-spoken, very, gentle. And over the years, I started to see, well, he actually has a problem, and it is a big problem right now. He doesn't know how to speak through the media. He has no idea how to bring the message across. And that started to become, I think, more and more of a handicap. And then, of course, Pope Francis was the opposite. He was such a natural and so much himself in any interview. So that's also something that I hope the next Pope, that's a quality the next Pope will have, is, having the talent to bring the message across. And it's not just by words. It's not just by decrees or theological, beautiful homilies. No, we need gestures. This is a time, this is an era of visual communication. And Pope Francis knew how to make visual statements. And that is rare. That is very rare. I don't know many cardinals that have that talent. So, yeah. Anyway, I think it's very likely that we're going to continue this direction. But if it's different, if it changes, well, let's wait and see, and let history judge. Let's see. As long as it's not an AI Pope, Star-Lord says, no, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Technically, the next Pope doesn't have to be a member of the College of Cardinals. It could be basically anyone, any male person, so it excludes 50% of the population. But and it has happened a few times in history that they called on someone outside of the College of Cardinals, but it's very rare, and especially now when you see just the quality of so many of these cardinals. Yeah, that would be the craziest thing. I mean, you don't find better people than inside the College of Cardinals right now. Mary is joining us from beautiful Houston. How is life in Texas? I haven't been there in ages. I miss you all. We've got Ken, who says hi. Ruben wants to know if I saw the movie Conclave, and is the process accurate? Well, I saw the first half hour of the movie. It's still on my to-watch list. The first part where the Pope dies and kind of the procedures around that is pretty much how it works. But then the actual conclave and all the machinations around it, that's a huge amplification and romanticized version of the truth. No. Someone said the other day, it's like, what was the analogy? Well, I can use a similar analogy. It's like watching an episode of Hell's Kitchen and then think you know how to cook. It's not the same, you know? Or watching one of those WrestleMania matches and then think you know all about sports. It's no, it's not. This is not the way things go. In fact, a few cardinals have said the process actually would be very boring to outsiders once they're inside the Sistine Chapel, because we do a lot of praying, and there are huge times of silence, like hours of silence. We celebrate Mass. It's the most boring thing ever, and it's deliberately done so because it's supposed to be a spiritual process. These cardinals are supposed to open their hearts for the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and so you need room for prayer. Does that preclude political machinations and lobbying? No. The church is just as human as she is divine. And so there is a lot of that going on. There has always been a lot of this going on. And yes, you have factions within the cardinals, and they will probably team up and try to position their candidate. And there are lots of political, there's a lot of political play in this whole process where, one of the strategies that could be employed is that they have like some radical conservative cardinal, and they have kind of a slightly less conservative cardinal, but then the group around those candidates, they want to make sure that their candidate gets on the balcony. And so one of the ways in which you can do that is to first propose this very extreme conservative kind of like not very pleasant guy. And then everybody's like, no, not him. And then in the next round, you say, well, what about this guy? And then it's like, well, actually, he's fine. Yeah, why not? It's the same stuff that happens when you go to a website and you have 3 products, and one is like the $5 product, and then you have like an insanely expensive version and it's $900, and then you have like a $450, and you're like, wow, the $450, that sounds reasonable, especially compared to the $900 thing, and nobody wants to have the $5 one. Oh, it's just psychology, and obviously some people will use tricks like that, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously, to make sure that the candidate they believe, and this is not malicious, this is just because they believe that we should go in this direction. And they have fully the right to think that. After all, their vote counts just as much as the vote from the other cardinals. But I think the majority, having been appointed by or created, you create cardinals. The majority of the cardinals have been created by Pope Francis and have a good relationship with Pope Francis. A lot of them are from territories and countries where there never were cardinals. And a lot of the kind of the older centers of power, they don't have cardinals anymore. They just have archbishops. And so that in itself is going to change a lot of the dynamics, because, you know, these people rarely travel and probably are not as much, even just because of the language barrier, might not be able to follow everything that's going on as well as the people that, you know, are from Europe or from North America or England. You know, they usually are much more informed. Doesn't mean that these people that are a little bit more on the sidelines, you could say, of the spectacle, that they are not wise. No, perhaps their perspective is even more, I don't know, to the point, because they're not part of the whole circus. It's a fascinating process. It's a really, really amazing time, I think, in the history of the church, each time when we get a new pope. And then, of course, you've got all the theater around it, which I think is just done to perfection. Italians are great at these kind of events. You saw that at the funeral. Pope Francis wanted to have a humble, simple funeral. Well, look at what they did. It rivaled a Hollywood production. Starlord says many people have misconceptions about the Bible in general. Humanists likes to rationalize away from that. They don't believe it's divinely inspired. Yeah, it's usually because they have this idea that God sat down, took a pen, and wrote the Bible. Or sometimes in paintings you will see an evangelist writing the gospel, and then there's an angel whispering in his ear what he should write. That's not how the Force works. The Bible is divinely inspired, but it doesn't mean that you can take out the human factor and the historic factor and all the kind of distortion that we as humans introduce in this. Or distortion may be too negative of a word, but it's our own human limitations in in passing on these stories. The Bible contradicts itself all the time. And so you have to be very careful not to, first of all, not to take the Bible literally. Like, you know, sometimes in evangelical circles they will do this, or the very fundamentalist Christian circles. That doesn't make sense. There's no Catholic Bible scientist that would ever condone such an approach. But it doesn't mean it's a fairy tale. All these stories are based on historical events, but they are stories of historical events. They are reinterpreted. You've got a lot of layers in there. The writers of the various books in the Bible have taken elements of history and even elements, especially in the earlier part of the Bible, of existing religions, and just took elements from that and stories from that and just put it in the blender and created something new. And so you see a lot of stuff, even about God himself and how he presents himself and how he behaves. Even the fact that I say he, like that's all, it's a distillation process over time that will help us to understand and to distill the meaning. But you cannot deduce it directly from the Bible itself. You always need an interpretive authority. And despite the fact that a lot of Protestants will deny this and say, no, we're just looking at the letter of the gospel, they are constantly playing an authoritative role in interpreting the Bible. They will pick out this and they will say, yeah, this is what God wants. It's exactly this. It's written here. And they will leave out all the other stuff that they don't like or that they don't care about. This is what you see happening in the United States in the way that, you know, or people around Trump interpret the Bible or use the Bible. I would even say often abuse the Bible to make it say stuff that is so flagrantly in contradiction with the tradition of the church and the majority of Christianity. But it's this pick and choose. It's using the Bible as a weapon instead of as a guiding star. It's using the Bible to confirm what you already believed. And I think by doing that, you actually you turn the Bible almost into a weapon, and it's a form of idolatry. Because what you're actually worshiping and what you're actually searching for is not God's will or to understand what God wants us to do. No, you want God to ratify what you want to do and what your vision of the world is. And that is why I'm so glad that we have biblical scholars and that there's so many different views on the Bible and perspectives. And it's usually the more stupid people are when they read the Bible, the worse the outcome is. So, and you see this all the time, and it just baffles me as a theologian myself. I would say I don't know much about the Bible, even though I studied for 10 years. I did 4 years of philosophy. I did a master's in theology, and I still don't think that I am knowledgeable enough to interpret the Bible. You really need expertise. And thankfully in the Catholic Church, you have this long-standing tradition of biblical research. And I mean, if you study biblical theology in Rome, I think it's like an 8-year curriculum. It's one of the hardest studies because they will tell you have to learn all these languages, sometimes even Arabic, so you understand the wider context in which all these different books were created and all the cultures. And so you need so much knowledge. And so people that take the Bible and say, well, in the Bible it says that, yeah. Anywho, Sausage Stream wants to know, why is there a Pope? There is a Pope, at least from the Catholic point of view, because there has always been a Pope since Jesus founded the church. There is an event in the Gospel where Jesus, after Peter betrayed him, tells Peter, I want you to take care of my flock. And Jesus tells Peter, I will call you Rock, Petrus in Latin, and I will build the church on you. And when Jesus rose from the dead, in the stories that follow the resurrection, you see constantly that Peter is acting as the leader of the apostles. This is a non-disputed role that he plays. And when Jesus goes back to his Father in heaven, and after the Pentecost, you constantly see in the way that these accounts have been written that Peter is the leader. Peter ends up in Rome, is martyred in the Vatican, where you have the Vatican right now. That used to be a racing course for horse and carriages, like Ben-Hur style. And they crucified Peter upside down on a cross just to make fun of the cross of Jesus. But then the apostles, after Peter died, chose a successor. And that is something that the church has continued to do up until this moment. And there is an unbroken line of the papacy throughout history. So that is why there is a pope. Since the time of Jesus, there has never not been a pope. There were even times that there were two popes. One anti-pope, or two people that claimed to be the real pope, and then the church had to intervene and say, well, you're the real guy, you're the one that we want to be pope, and you're not. And that also shows that the papacy itself is a function that only exists by virtue of the will of, in this case, the cardinals, but they represent the will of the people and the church. So the apostles have always chosen successors from in their midst, from people that they already knew. This happens even when the apostle Judas, kills himself. Then they need to find a successor, and they have two candidates, and then they just cast lots, and they pick that guy and not that guy. And so a lot of what we see today during a conclave kind of goes back to those very early years of Christianity. Why aren't popes embalmed? This is a personal choice. They used to do that in the past. The last few popes have said, no, I don't want that. And so they are not embalmed. Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict, Pope Francis have all just been put in a regular coffin. Even with Pope Francis, even simpler, because there used to be 3 coffins. So it would be all like really wrapped up and closed and vacuumed and everything. But this Pope said, no, 1 casket is enough, you know. I'm not going to escape. He didn't say that, but maybe that's what he was thinking. I'm not going to climb out of my coffin. So it tends towards simplicity. In the past, people would embalm popes so they could put them on display, a bit like, you know, Mao Zedong in China or the pharaohs. It was a way kind of veneration for the person, but Pope Francis was very averse to kind of personal glorification, and so he wants the church to focus on the future and not on him. And I think that's a wise thing to say. We've got Mary also from Renkum. Good to see you online. I'm very far behind on the questions as usual because I'm a chatterbox. If you create a Stormtrooper armor, I'm calling you FR177. That's good. What's the 177? How is my knee? Thank you for asking. My knee is still a little bit tender, but I can walk. I walk about 6 kilometers per day, which is not much, but I'm okay. I'm gradually kind of building that up. Have you had fun with Oblivion? Yes, I have. I've only played it once. I played through the whole introduction and I was blown away. It looks amazing. I need to find more time to play it. I also started playing Claire Obscure, and I think it's like Section 33 or something like that. It's a stunning game. It's made by a French gaming company. It's the most beautiful game I've ever seen. It's a little bit, gameplay is a bit like Persona, if you've ever played that. So it's turn-based RPG. But it's done in a superior way. I've never seen gameplay like this, and the story, the music is just mind-blowingly good. I'm actually surprised that they can do this with a humble 5-year-old Xbox Series X, but they do, and my goodness, so many beautiful games. Also played more. No, actually, I didn't play more of Indiana Jones. I'm still locked in the Vatican, but that's also an amazing game. It's still humid in Houston, but not that bad. WrestleMania is a sport? I don't know. I never watch it. Jacob says, I'm sort of a religious or spiritual free agent these days, but a big fan. That's great. Love your perspective. That's really nice to know. Hey, we're all in a certain way kind of like roaming around and trying to gain wisdom and trying to understand. That's the fun of our process. Nozomi wants to know if I will make more content around anime. Yes, I want to. I'm literally thinking about that every single day, and it's mostly I get stuck when it comes to the production. Well, actually, no, two things. Since I do a lot of different things at once, like writing a fantasy novel, editing, making podcasts, I'm giving courses. I'm going to start this week with a course on Celtic Saints. If you want to have more information, just go to my website, fatherroderick.com. And I watch a lot of stuff. I'm currently watching Andor. And so I don't have enough focus because for anime, what I want to do is, what I'd love to do is to take one series and go through that series and do commentaries. And then once I finish it, go on to the next one. But anime series, as you know, usually have a lot of content, like 20, 25 episodes is very common. And so I always fall behind on my anime, or I start watching something and then I'm super excited. I make a video and then I kind of lose track. So it is my intention this upcoming weekend, actually, on Saturday, I'm going to the biggest anime convention of the Netherlands. And I want to take that as a kind of a new start of making more anime content. So I'm going to film some interviews there with cosplayers. I'm going to post that. And in addition, I want to go... there's one series in particular that I want to comment on because it has a lot in common with the fantasy novel that I'm currently writing. And that is Vinland Saga. Vinland Saga takes place in... it's a little bit later in history, but it's around the same... medieval times as my fantasy novel. That series takes place in England. My story takes place in Ireland, but there are a lot of kind of crossovers. So I was thinking to watch that series. There are 2 seasons, I think, so far. Do some commentary because that's a very, there's a lot of religion in that story because it's based on real history. So I'm sure that I have some stuff to say about that. So that's kind of what I'm planning, and I hope that that will also give me some inspiration for my novel. Not to mention that I can then also advertise my novel to my anime people. I can say, hey, if you like Vinland Saga, check out my novel. Just go to my BookTube site and subscribe, and I'll send you the story. Something like that. Another series that I started watching and I'm very intrigued with, and I think I have a lot to say about it, is Orb. So that's about the move from heliocentrism to kind of the concept that we are not the center of the universe, including some religious dimensions in that story, even though it's a fictional story, but there's still a lot that I want to say about that. And then, of course, there are a few other series that I think I should just watch for fun first before I make videos about it. Otherwise, if I watch anime just to make videos, it becomes a chore. And I just love these stories, but I also want to take my time to just enjoy them and then maybe go back. So hope that answers your question. Thanks for asking. Masked Saiyan wants to know if I've seen Daredevil Born Again. I've only seen the first episode, and then other stuff got in the way. I thought the first episode was fine. I've heard from some people that it's not as good as the Netflix seasons, but... And if I'm totally honest, I've never really been a Daredevil fan. I mean, I thought the stories were okay, but it's like the dark vigilante genre is just not for me. I'm not much of a Batman fan either. I'm kind of more for the crazy adventure. So for me, the ideal story is Guardians of the Galaxy. That's my happy place when it comes to superheroes. But yeah, eventually I'll watch it. But it's right now it's still on it's I've shelved it for now because I need to focus on Andor, and on anime. Jesus validated the Old Testament, making it an authoritative source. Yeah, kind of. I mean, Jesus was also aware that the Old Testament is what it is, and it's a collection of books, so Jesus always tries to show that what is hinted at, what is promised in the history of God with his people before him comes to fulfillment in him. So he sees continuity and not contrast. And he himself was raised as a practicing Jew. So he knew the tradition very well, but he also knew that stuff was missing, and he had a message. He had something more to reveal, and so you can always read the two. And from the Catholic perspective, we've always used kind of the angle of the Gospels to look at the Old Testament text, and sometimes to the detriment, I think, of the value of the Old Testament books themselves. Because if you're only looking at it from the perspective of like, how does this relate to Jesus, you are forcing a perspective on these older texts to make them say what you want to. I mean, there's the temptation to make it say what you want to hear. And I think that it's a valid approach, and it's something you see among church fathers all the time, but it's also reductive. I think there is a lot to learn from, not just about God and about theology, but also about the various cultures and the evolution of religion over the centuries by studying these Bible books. In that respect, the Bible is a unique collection of stories, and it shows you over many centuries how people have been thinking about God and about what faith should mean in this world, and how it relates to real events, and how the role that faith plays in times of intense distress and defeat, and also in times of prosperity. And that gives us so much. It gives us so many mirrors to look in and to compare what we read there and to apply it to our own times. We're reading stories of a journey, and we put that next to our own journey, and then in the middle there's the road that Jesus traces, and I think the art of incorporating the Bible in your life is by having it as you could say, a travel guide. Some people read the whole Bible every year from the front page to the last page, front to cover. But it's not really meant for that. It's not even written like that. But it is this is why the liturgy is so helpful, because it will give you pieces of the Bible, in a piecemeal fashion, and you can absorb it over time. And it has taken me a lifetime to understand certain texts. And still, every time I prepare a homily, I don't prepare much, but when I read those readings, it speaks to me in a different way. And it's not because the Bible changes, it's because my walk in life has changed, and because the road we're on is different from a couple of years ago. And so that opens new perspectives on the texts. Eric says, hello from Dixon, Tennessee. I think TN is Tennessee, right? I'm a minister and a nerd. Yes, awesome. Thank you for emphasizing the humanity and divinity of Scripture. I'm reading a lot of source criticism for my master's in Old Testament faith increase. That is so fascinating, and I'm so envious of you that you are currently in a phase of your life where you can dedicate all your time to the studies of the Scriptures. It is, I mean, if there's one regret that I have about the time that I was studying, was that I didn't do more Bible study. I was more of a thinker, and I think it's because I did a master's in philosophy first that primed me to approach theology from the same perspective. But now that I'm older and wiser, I'm thinking, dude, you should have done way more Bible study, because it's actually so much more fascinating and more, it helps you to be broader in the way you think. For many years, I was a system thinker, and I loved building systems as if religion is like a Lego set, and if it all fits together, it gives you so much. It's so gratifying. But that's not how life usually works. Life is messy, and you have to improvise, and you have to look at the specific situations, and the Bible helps you to develop that mindset more than systematic theology does. So anyway, I'm still learning a lot, and thanks to TikTok, I've discovered a couple of biblical scholars that have opened my eyes and make me think every day. It's like, oh, it's so fascinating, and there's so many more. I mean, I'll never be able to answer all the questions that I have, but that's what I love. It's like every day is a new journey of discovery, and I'm so grateful to know all these people from all over the world studying these same sacred texts and getting so much out of it. Let's see. David says, I'm so sorry I have to cancel my subscription as I lost my job. Oh, that is so sad to hear. I'm sorry to hear that, and don't worry about it at all. In fact, David, can you send me an email? I'll hook you up. I'll make sure that you still get all the perks, because this is completely out of your control. But just if you could do that, send me an email at fatherroderick@trideo.com, and I'll get in touch and I'll make sure that you don't lose anything. I'm already so grateful that you have supported me in the past, and I'm definitely praying for you that you will soon find a new job. These for a lot of people, these are difficult times, but get in touch. We'll fix this. What are your expectations for the second season of The Last of Us? You know what? I haven't even seen the first season. I chickened out after one episode. And I played a bit of the game, but I don't have a PlayStation anymore, so I can't play the game. I don't have it on PC yet. What are my expectations? I hope it's going to be good. I know that the first season blew everyone away, and I'm totally expecting the same to happen with the second season. Again, you see how many stuff I need to watch? Life's too short, man. 177 means that I am one with the Force, the Father Acolyte. Well, thank you. I try to be. Let's see. With the email I'm getting, it's sent a week after it has come out for the premium podcast. Okay. I'm not sure. So you mean like the email you get that too late, or I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but we'll fix it. Just let's get in touch. Pika has played the Persona games, I know, and they're great. So you'll like this French game. Have I seen Severance? Oh my goodness, yes. Severance is my all-time favorite television show after Lost. I was glued to the screen. I love Severance. Yes, I can talk for hours about that. I'm not going to do that right now, but it's so fascinating and it's so well done. Also, I'm sure you already know this, make sure that you listen to the official podcast, because that is must hear content. It is so incredibly interesting to hear how that series was created. It's peak television, and it's renewed for a third season, so I'm so happy. Yeah, Severance. That alone is why I think people should make sure they have Apple TV Plus. I think I would even get Apple TV Plus. Even I would put it above Netflix right now because of Severance and Ted Lasso. David watched Prime Target on Apple TV. Oh, interesting. I haven't even... That's not even on my radar. That's the one thing that Apple doesn't do very well. They don't advertise their shows. With Severance, they did, and it paid off. I think they got a lot of new subscribers because of that one series, so hopefully they'll learn from that. Ruben wants to know if I'm excited for Superman. Very excited. I love the direction that they're taking with this Superman and with the whole DC universe. I think we're finally going to see something that is different enough from Marvel, but also has enough quality to stand on its own. I'm really looking at, and to be honest, I'm a little bit tired of the Marvel stuff. Like, I can't get excited about these movies anymore. There's so many of them, and I kind of lose track of the story, and it's just all the same. So yeah, with Superman, I think that James Gunn is doing something totally new and at the same time very old, because I think that he's harkening back to what Superman meant when I was a kid in the 70s. And the kind of hopeful, optimistic story it was for a world that was actually in a crisis. And I think that's what Superman embodies. It's a story of hope. Let's see. Did I watch the Predator Badlands trailer? No, not yet. But it's going to be a Predator Aliens crossover. We had the two movies which we don't speak about, but it's true. It's really amazing that this franchise is still going so strong. By the way, now that we mention it, I heard that there is a fan edit of the third Alien movie. And from what I've heard, it is an incredible job. They did an incredible job. That third movie was recut twice, I think, and none of the existing versions are that good. But it turns out that with a good editor, it becomes gold. So I'm definitely. I think it's called like something like Aliens 4K. You might want to Google that. But I'm planning on watching that very soon because I'm a huge fan of the franchise. And I actually thought that Aliens 3 wasn't all that bad. But now I'm curious to see what they did with it in this fan cut. I love fan edits. There are a couple of fan edits for Star Wars television shows as well. And they were all good. They were really good. Herman wants to know if I'm hoping that Cardinal Ike will become Pope. No, I don't hope he will become Pope. I personally, I would prefer someone who is more in line with Pope Francis. And Cardinal Ike has been very vocal about his opposition against some of the aspects of the pontificate of Pope Francis. So, no, I don't think he is the right person that we need right now. But who am I? I'm just a priest. So, and also for his health. I mean, he doesn't have he's not the healthiest cardinal. I think this job would kill him. Well, maybe that's a little bit too dramatic, but I think it would be incredibly taxing for him. And yeah, although I think he has said himself in some interviews that he's actually quite willing to become Pope. That's usually a sign that that's not the candidate who's going to be Pope. Someone who wants to be Pope is probably not the right candidate. But I was very surprised that he said that. Very surprised. A little bit weird also. But anyway, no, I don't think that Cardinal Ike is the right person for the papacy right now. I want more continuity. And I would like to have a cardinal with a kind of a broader theological view as well. Cardinal Ike has had his formation as a priest in Rolduc, which is in the south of the country, in a very polarized era of the Catholic Church. It was like an internal seminary. It was, it was not bad, but it didn't compare to the kind of like university level type of theology that the rest of the country benefited from. And so when I read his writings, I'm not very impressed by his theology. I think it is very Thomistic, or almost neo-Thomistic in certain sense. Very technical, and technical in the sense that what I miss sometimes is just real life. Cardinal Ike has never been a parish priest. Only like a very short time of his life. I think not even before. He's never been a pastor. So he's never been in charge of a parish. And it shows. He's an intellectual. He's very bright, very intelligent, good speaker. But I want a pastor. I want someone just like Pope Francis, who is close to his flock, smells like the flock, is willing to be a pope of the heart and not of the mind. I know it's very schematic what I'm saying, but for me, it's a way to kind of try to tell myself what am I hoping for. I want someone with a pastoral heart, and I think that requires also a certain pastoral parochial experience. Pope Benedict also never had a parish. He was a professor, and it showed. Pope John Paul II, on the contrary, did work even as a student's pastor, and you could tell he knew how to communicate. He knew the struggles of day-to-day life, and even though he was still very, like a thinker and philosopher, theologian, that wasn't even his strong point. I mean, I studied Pope John Paul II when I was, or when he was still Wojtyła. I studied his philosophy. And I didn't write a thesis about it, but I studied it for 2 years. I was not impressed. He was not a very good theologian. I mean, decent. He didn't say anything stupid, but it just didn't. It lacked depth. It was a bit. I don't know. How do I say this? Yeah, it was just not. He's kind of a mediocre theologian. I think Pope Benedict was a way better theologian than John Paul II. Even when he was a pope, what he wrote, like, would recommend it without any hesitation. I mean, that is high quality theology. I wasn't always in agreement with kind of the practical way of translating that theology. And it also missed a bit of bandwidth, I think, like human bandwidth. But still, it holds up. It holds up. Anyway, what do I know? It's just my 2 cents. I'm just an internet priest, so don't take any of this seriously. Dear Jan says, I saw the registration for Celtic Saints is live. How can I register? Try to follow the community members donation, but it fills on PayPal. Oh, wow. Okay, send me an email. I'll fix that. Yeah, I have to say the website is not very practical when it comes to these payments. Yeah, just send me an email and I'll hook you up with the course. It's just like I used to have someone who did this for 20 hours per week, and I could just outsource it and Inge would just look at it and fix it. Now I have to do everything myself. I'm not very technical. And so, yeah, the website is a little bit starting to creak here and there. But thanks for your interest, and I'll certainly be able to add you to the group. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I had 50 people here in the parish who followed the course, and they were all super excited about it. So that encouraged me to do the course online as well. And I might actually repeat it in the future. Oh, you haven't listened to the Severance podcast yet? Oh, you'll have a blast. It is amazing. They only did a podcast during the 2nd season, but they do cover the 1st season as well. It's hosted by the director and by the main character. And so, and they have like actors of the episodes on each show. It's so good. So good. I want to re-listen to it. Let's see. How is my book going? Ash wants to know. It's going really well. Actually, I earlier today, I recorded a video update about it. So you might want to check that out on my channel. So it's Father Roderick-Books on YouTube. But it's going very well. I'm working on the plot line, the overall plot of this. So hopefully at the beginning of May, I will have a 40 chapter outline of the book that I'm going to work with. And then I can start writing the actual chapters. So it's going well. Are you aware of Pucci from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? No, I'm not. I watched the 1st season of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and for some reason, the anime doesn't work for me. It's just really not my thing. It's so over the top. I know a lot of people love it, and it gets better, but it kind of like I tried hard because so many people asked me to watch it, and I just couldn't care for it that much. But tastes differ. To each his own. The fan edit of Alien 3 is amazing. That is good to know. All right. Well, thank you. I'll check it out. I'll Google for it. Herman says, I think the Cardinal Ike would be great. He would bring a lot of young people back to the church because a lot of these young people want a more traditional church. That is certainly a demographic that he is targeting and that he's very excited about. I think he himself is more kind of likes more of a traditional vibe, and that's valid. I mean, that's okay. It's not entirely my style. I love liturgy, and I'm, if you hear me speak and watch me celebrate Mass, I'm a very traditional priest to a certain extent, but I do believe in my encounters with young people everywhere, also on these fantasy festivals, I see the world is so diverse, and the church needs to be close to people also that are in the margins of the church. And I think that Pope Francis did that very well, just reaching out to the people that are not really in line with all the rules and regulations. And I believe that is a very important thing to do nowadays. We can always, like going back to and I think even going back, I mean, I'm an old guy. I knew the traditional church. I grew up in it. I don't want to go back because I think that the image that a lot of people have of those older times is romanticized. There were a lot of issues that I have, and also as a theologian and having studied the evolution of liturgy, I think actually the modern liturgy is closer to what the Christians have celebrated in the first few centuries. There's a lot of depth. Now, I agree with you that a lot of the liturgy that you find in parishes nowadays is lackluster and superficial and even like disrespectful sometimes. And I'm not at all in favor of that. But I also don't want to go back just to Latin masses and all that, because I think that you would raise the threshold so much for people that are not familiar with that language, are not familiar with that tradition. And I think we're missing out on connecting with a lot of young people. I think there's a way, and I try to do that every single day. There's a way to connect with young people, even if they're not faithful, they're not believers yet, and at the same time staying totally true to your faith and to your tradition. But I think it's kind of a dead alley to try to recreate some kind of romanticized traditional church that, if you look at the real history, it never really existed. Anyway, it's a long discussion, but I just wanted to give you an idea where I stand in this. I have seen the first 3 episodes of season 2 of Andor. I actually recorded 3 episodes. I did 3 reviews in my podcast, Story Secrets. So you might want to check that out. It's on my website, fatherroderick.com/podcasts. And then go look for the first 3 episodes of this week. And I might do some videos as well. I do like to watch Doctor Who, but I'm not current yet with the new season. Let's see. I need to start wrapping up because we're in overtime right now. I'm just going to pick out a few of the questions and skip the rest. There is a manga about Make the Exorcist Fall in Love. I've never heard of it. It might come across my radar. I don't read a lot of manga, but thanks for the tip. Anyway, thank you so much for your patience, for hearing me out. I hope I didn't scandalize too many of you with my sometimes outspoken views, but what you see is what you get. I try to be completely transparent and honest and really answer your questions, even though in the past I would probably have been more diplomatic, but I kind of stopped caring about, what other people think. I think you have the right to know where I stand and what I believe, and it's totally fine. And I hope I make that clear all the time. It's totally fine if you have a different opinion, different perspective, different point of view. I think that actually enriches the conversation. So thank you for your wonderful questions, for taking the time to listen. I hope we meet again next week. If you want to check out my course or even participate in my course on the Celtic saints, I'm going to take my students for 6 weeks on a journey through the early medieval times, and we're going to encounter all the big saints, St. Patrick, St. Kevin, St. Brandon, St. Bridget, you name it. And also some lesser known saints that have fascinating lives. I'm going to show you a lot of the photos and the videos that I filmed in Ireland. And then, of course, we're going to talk about what does that mean for us. And how can we apply that wisdom to our own lives? So there's going to be ample time for Q&A as well. If you want to find out more, go to fatherroderick.com/Celtic Saints. And final call to action, you see this here? This? Father Roderick /Discord. I want you to be part of my Discord server. It's a wonderful community. I need more people that want to talk about Star Wars. I mean, I'm like a voice in the desert who cries, has anyone seen Andor? Crickets. If you love Andor, you've got stuff to say, please join my Discord. Let's talk Star Wars. I miss that so much. Anyway, it's free. Sign up here, and you'll get a role automatically, and let's have some fun. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless.